for now. Let me introduce Presley, W2PW. So with that an initial call sign. And I'm expecting a lot. I have so many questions about ALLSTAR. Need to have you get into it first, so we can then figure out what questions to ask. And hopefully you'll answer some of them along the way. We would like.
Some looks are still free.
Anyway, all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, hi, my name is Press, W2PW, and I'm pleased to be here to discuss one of my favorite topics, which is ALLSTAR. I would like this to be an interactive question and answer sort of a thing, so please do not hesitate to go, hey, what? What's the thing that's on there? And just so I can gauge a level of awareness and be proud, on a scale of an ALLSTAR expert to I couldn't spell ALLSTAR if you gave me 24 letters and 3 special characters, where would you say that the majority of you are? Would you say that you're, I know Glenn, you've got a node. Who has a node or has at least known what a node is? Okay, we got an open field here at this point. Okay. ALLSTAR is a method of linking base stations and repeaters and radioless nodes so that they can communicate with each other. Now, ALLSTAR is literally based on the asterisk phone system, the PBX phone system. So each of the repeaters, base stations, nodes, radioless nodes, those are all effectively just like extensions in an office. So you can pick up an extension and call down the hall. You can make an outgoing call to the outside world. You can take an incoming call. And if you think about it in those terms, it all sort of begins to fall into place a little bit. Yes? What is a node? A node is a device through a computer generally that will patch your radio, repeater, headset, or telephone into the ALLSTAR system. Now, most of the nodes these days are based on Raspberry Pis because they're inexpensive, they're perfectly suited for the task, they're not giant boxes that are sitting there, you know, using heat and electricity. Did you have a question?
Yes, sir. Sorry to interrupt. The Raspberry Pi sits there. What does it get for input and how does it pass it to the next node or sensor?
That's a great question. Okay. Anybody can guess how we get the radio into the Pi?
RFID?
Called the interface. So the interface is a USB, generally a USB device, will take audio from the receiver and put it out into the web, and from the web, put it out on a transmitter. If you don't mind, can we start sharing screen? Rob is going to share the screen that we have. And if anybody has HTs that they can quickly, program, these 2 devices here are on those frequencies. So if you want to, program in, you'll be able to hear some things going on. So this is literally a duplex node. It's a full duplex node. It's a miniature repeater. It's got a receiver and a transmitter. Nodes could be even simpler than this. They could just be this device right here. This is a simplex transceiver. But what I did was I took a simplex transceiver and a simplex transceiver and I married them together, and now all of a sudden you've got an in and an out. Now, why is it beneficial to have duplex? If you were listening to a long-winded station and they were transmitting on your node and you're listening to them in the car, the portable, whatever, and they're talking for 2.5 minutes, can you get in there and change anything while they're talking? Absolutely not, because your radio is transmitting. So your node cannot hear what you want to do to it because the other end is talking. So that's why duplex is nice. However, duplex is not necessary. Like I said, that's a simplex node, and you can start with a Raspberry Pi, and this device is called a Sherry, and it stands for SA818 Ham ALLSTAR Radio Interface. This thing right here, I built it last night in an hour and a half, and it was about 85 bucks. So the cost of entry is not insane. These are insane. So if you've got any pies at home in a drawer, I'll either buy them or you should do something with them.
Raspberry Pis lately have been unobtainium.
For about 2 years now.
Yep.
Now also, don't get caught up in the whole, I gotta have the best pie out there. Because if you decide that you want a Raspberry Pi 4, is the best thing, right? No, they're overpowered, overperforming, make a lot of heat, completely unnecessary. So if you can score a Pi 3, or even a Pi 2, you're better off than holding out for a Pi 4. Go ahead.
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry.
I don't know what is a Raspberry.
Sorry, a little louder, please.
He doesn't know what a Raspberry Pi is.
A Raspberry Pi is a single board computer. About that big. They run Linux. They run on an SD card. So your entire operating system is on a tiny micro flash that you can buy at CVS, literally. Okay? So we've begun to touch on how you make it, but I haven't really maybe fully explored what the heck it'll do for you. So what you can do is with your node at home, or your node on a repeater, or your radialess node in your house or in your car, you can connect to other nodes on the fly. These screens right here are a Supermon screen. Supermon is simply a web-based interface that's literally the websites inside the Pi. And that's how you do point-and-click management of your connections. You can also do DTMF. Up, it'll do that. So you can do DTMF, you can do click, click, click. You can do apps on your phone. So if your phone's on the same network as your Raspberry Pi, or even if your phone is supplying the internet for that Pi because you're driving around, you can manage your node from your phone. There are manager applications such as something called Node Remote, where on your phone screen, you can set up and knock down connections. Now, speaking of setting up and knocking down, Rob, would you real quick jump on 465-731? There's a net going on right now, 8 o'clock, out in Suffolk County. How easy it is to attach and disconnect nodes and networks on the fly. So there's a net going on right now on 145.210 out east. And so we can tune into that. So this is a net that's going on right now. My repeater has a timer in it. So my repeater normally is on the East Coast reflector, which is a network of a couple hundred repeaters and radios and stuff like that. But at 5 minutes to 8 on Wednesday night, my node goes, oh, time for the net. So it disconnects from the East Coast reflector and connects into the Suffolk County radio club. At 8:45 p.m., it automatically disconnects and connects back to the East Coast reflector.
It's the weirdest.
That sounds like a front tab to me.
Yes, it does. So Glenn is becoming an expert in cron tab. Tab is a program that runs in the background that says, oh, it's time to do something. Oh, it's time to undo something. Okay. The one thing I will tell you, by the way, this talk is very free form. There's no path to it. So we're going to bounce around. But again, anybody who does not follow what I'm saying, please jump your hand in the air. Okay, so with a cron tab, for example, it's very important when you get into this in the future that you disconnect everything before you connect to something else, because everything is on a level playing field. In other words, if my node is connected to 48 repeaters on the West Coast, and I go ahead and I say, oh, I have another 110 repeaters in the East Coast. Well, guess what? You've just joined everybody, and they all go through you, and that's not a good day. So it's very important to disconnect before you connect.
Don't cross the stream.
Don't cross the street. Think before you leave. Okay, yes.
So I guess these connections are to the web.
The connections are through the web, yes. Okay, so this is called VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol.
Where you mentioned this whole web.
I'm having so much trouble hearing you, sorry.
So how should I imagine this whole network?
It's not actually a network, it's basically more or less point to point. Okay, there's no central server. The only thing is that there is a central routing table that says, I want to reach Rob's node. So I connect to Rob's node, it goes out, it fetches Rob's current IP address and connects me together. When Rob's node changes, that information is updated. So when I want Rob and he's now over here, my node doesn't know the difference, it just finds it.
That's basically DNS.
Close.
Dynamic
So-
DNS.
So what it is there's a lookup table. So everybody's node that registers on the air will register their IP of the moment. And then periodically, your node will download a fresh list of nodes. And then I go, I want to connect to, Rob. The computer goes, where is he? Okay, here he is. And it goes to there.
It even works with files.
iOS is my least favorite because their router sucks, but that's another story altogether.
You have to open up your firewall.
Ports, okay. Interestingly enough, unlike IRLP, you do not have to have an incoming port because you're making an outgoing connection. However, it is far better to have the ports opened up inside your router because that allows you to take an incoming connection. For example, Glenn just got a new router last week. Okay, we're arguing with that router and setting up the incoming port forwards. You would make an outgoing call, no problem, but the recipient of the call has to be able to accept an incoming call. Is everybody clear on a little on routers and how port forwarding works?
I'll give you that later if you want.
What specific form are we looking at? Because you're using voice over IP, the SIP client, fight,
There's a SIP client for it, yes. What does SIP stand for again? I forgot.
session initiation.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So ALLSTAR uses about 4 or 5 ports for incoming connections. But again, they're not necessary as long as the other end is able to accept a call. But you should have an incoming port to your house if you want to receive an incoming call. Now, there are ways to get around this.
You
For
have,
example,
you have 4 TCPs
yep,
and you have 3 UDPs.
yes. Now,
I have them all here, but.
the UDPs are primarily used for incoming ALLSTAR connections or Echolink. Echolink. Yes, you can bake Echolink into your node at no extra cost. So if you have an Echolink node number, or,
System.
KD2UK-L, for example, is a link Echolink connection. You can bake it into your ALLSTAR and literally talk in and out on the Echolink. Go ahead, Mike.
What's Echolink?
What's Echolink?
Next to it.
That's why we're gonna go up and down the hall here. So Echolink is one of the first, IRLP was the first, but Echolink is one of the first early on VoIP, voice over internet protocol, methods for putting ham radio over the web. Now, Echolink can be on a repeater, it can be on your phone client, it can be on your PC. There's a lot of ways to do Echolink. The good news is Echolink is free. The bad news is Echolink is free. And what that means is you've got a lot of weird things going on out there, okay? You've got people all over the world who can make connections to each other just seeing what's out there. So I call them drive-bys. In other words, there may be a randomization. So I click on my Echolink node, random connection. I'll get somebody in Turkey dropping in on my repeater. Okay, hi. But sometimes it gets a little weird too. So there's less control on Echolink. And the other thing is, Echolink can be all over the place in terms of what their audio levels and audio quality are. Okay? Go ahead.
Question.
Wow.
The radios that we use are analog radios.
Yes.
Right? Voice over IP does not work with analog audio. Each digital device is assuming it's a codec. Could be a vocal. Could you explain that part of it that seems to be missing from the
Okay.
ALLSTAR documentation?
Yeah. So remember I talked about interfaces. There's a number of interfaces, but they are very inexpensive. They're almost everywhere. They're called the CM108 family, for example, and CM108 is a chipset that is particularly well suited to take audio from your headset, from your receiver, from your repeater, any audio that you wish to get onto the network goes into the receive port on the interface. And then out it goes. And then when it comes back, it comes out of the transmit port of the interface. It activates your transmitter, your headset, your repeater, and the local person hears it. Go ahead.
Have a true password, I was asking.
Okay, codec.
When it's going over the web, when it's using SIP, session initiation protocol, it's basically sort of a blank field. Is that a D4 style codec? Is it using
What style?
D4? Is it a VLOG encoder?
It is.
Is it a 32 kilobit with somewhat bandwidth conservation?
So early on, they used GSM. Then they came up with the uncompressed. I've heard of ULaw, I've heard of,
Able.
yeah, there's a number of codecs. The thing is, you don't have to worry about it. The nodes will work it out amongst themselves, and they'll pick the lowest common denominator. So in other words, if I connect up to an all-star node that only supports GSM, it'll work, it'll step it down, it'll sound kind of like a phone. Or if they're handling uncompressed, it sounds fantastic. I mean, all-star audio is next level ridiculously good. You can hear PL from the other end. You can hear the cat scratching its butt down the hall. It's really, really good. Go ahead, Rob.
Why is ALLSTAR better than IRLP and Echoes?
Because it's newer, they've had more time to learn.
Partially. It's better than echoing in a number of ways because it is not so much of a wild, wild west. You can't just, take your laptop and a microphone and talk into it because, you have the echoey sound. Okay, that's typically not done in ALLSTAR. Why is it better than IRLP? IRLP was a great system, but it is rather closed in its nature. You must purchase a board from a guy. It's not a lot of money. It's $139. It won't change your life. But the IRLP network is what it is, and the ALLSTAR network is so many different things. For example, IRLP again is point-to-point radios, repeaters, that's that. IRLP does require incoming ports to work. You cannot use an IRLP without having ports. That gets a little weird when you're out on the road on your cell phone or in a hotel. Again, this little portable node, it's on my cell phone right now. There's no incoming ports, but I can make an outgoing call and I hear the audio coming back. IRLP, you can't. I'm going to pause right there to see if I lost anybody. Or am I going right?
So it's the difference between a dictatorship and let's say what they have in Iraq right now, which is just a bunch of different.
Not going to get into that, but I can tell you this. Both IRLP and ALLSTAR are open source, but IRLP is closed in that you cannot get in there and make personal custom modifications. ALLSTAR is literally as open as you can download. You can recompile the entire system from source and you could do your own custom thing. For example, I often hear people say, oh, my node is digital and analog. I can talk on, ALLSTAR supports DMR. Now, does ALLSTAR support DMR? Nope. As much as people would like to tell you it does not. If you can take a DMR radio and speak in your ALLSTAR, get back to me, because that's not there. You can get in on analog, and analog shoots through the network and it comes out on the other end. And yes, the intermediary step is digital because it's the SIP codecs, but it's really analog. You got an analog radio to an analog radio. There are rooms, reflectors, connections, bridges. There's ways to take your ALLSTAR audio and show up in the DMR network. And there's ways to hear the DMR traffic and show up on your ALLSTAR. The problem is you're doing audio conversions. So it tends to sound poor. Okay, there are some that sound better than others, some that sounds worse. One of the guys I know makes a joke, he says, you gotta spend a lot of money to sound that bad. Because because digital heard on analog is kind of grody, and analog heard on digital is kind of grody. So if you want to be digital, be digital. If you want to be analog, but be aware that if you do try to cross the streams, it's okay, but you're going to have a lot of degradation. Are there any questions at this point? Sounds like.
Well, the East Coast Reflector has all sorts of nodes coming.
Yes, they do. So for example, what's called the East Coast Reflector has a way to get into it on V-Star, DMR, P25, System Fusion. In fact, that redhead guy right there built bridges. So if you want to talk some next level stuff, you can talk about how to get in with P25. But remember, it is going to be P25 that's converted down to analog and shoots across the network. So it sounds, okay, but not optimal.
Just more or less a comment, which is DMR and D-Star and a bunch of these other things. Don't actually use codecs. What they use is a technology called vocoding. And vocoding is basically a means of
Hardware.
yeah, it doesn't really digitize your voice.
Right.
What it does is it has a set of pre-canned sounds, and it uses your voice to control them. And the control bits of your speech are what gets sent over the air, and at the other end, it gets regenerated and becomes a speech signal. A lot of people don't understand that. It's very, very critical for what it works.
Right, and also you've got a DMR, you got a P25, you got a Fusion, you got a DMR. Why do they all talk to each other? Because it's not in the manufacturer's best interest to do so. In other words, if I'm ICOM and I design a system 20 plus years ago, MB chip, fine, it sounds good, but you've got to buy that MB chip. That's it. There's no other way. The MB Corporation, or whatever they're called, has the rights to that. Now the DMR uses a different one, now the P25 is a different one. And it's not in their interest to put a multiple format chip in the radio.
It's called patents.
Yeah. Now, there's a new thing on the horizon called M17. And I like to refer to it as the last digital mode you'll ever need, because it is open source. It is by hands, it is truly open source. It's a growing project and it's not beholden to one manufacturer's thing. The bad news is it's sort of getting going and it's going to be a slow process, but M17 is what you want to think about for the future. Yes.
So how does your Pi-Star work that you're able to, have all these different sources on your repeater?
Magic. I don't mean to, I'm being flippant, but the bottom line is there are ways. Now it's one mode at a time then. See, your Pi-Star actually scans, so you can see the little lights on the modem. And when they're going like this, you can grab your DMR HD and it locks, and then you let go, and then you grab your D-Star and it locks. So there's no real, at the same time, you can't grab your D-Star HD and your DMR HD and go through it. Okay, it's which one at the moment. There are bridges out there that will go like DMR to P25 and YSF to Fusion, but we're definitely out in the weeds at this point.
Are there working implementations of M17 yet?
Yes. There's a project where they take the MD380, which is an interesting radio because they've actually taken the brains of it and made an emulation in software, and that's one of the ways that the DMR to analog thing works. And there's a hardware modification for the MD380 to make it M17 soon. It works one way, and it's a little rocky, but it does involve taking the radio apart and moving a couple of chip capacitors. It's not for the faint of heart, but it is possible. So the MD380 is the first radio that can be modified to work on both. I think it's both DMR and MD380 at the same time. Do you have a question, Rob? Okay, so Mike, come in, because I can't.
So I am trying, so let's do an experiment. So we have a friend in California, and I sent him an email.
Could you 256 me, Rob? 2560? Yes, go ahead.
So I sent him an email over my laptop.
Yep.
The guy received it on his laptop in California. And now I take the radio and I send the message to the radio, to his radio, over this ALLSTAR stuff. What is in essence the difference between these two communications?
So an email is a message, it's an electronic package of information that goes and then gets received. This is streaming audio, this is, real live, audio communication. So for example, there's
Let's
a,
change the experiment.
okay.
So I contact my friend by Skype
Mhm.
and talk
Right,
by Skype and he receives it by Skype.
this is closer to Skype than email, a lot closer.
Yeah, so let's do the Skype and the ALLSTAR. What is the difference physically in the communication? So I'm just trying to imagine what is the difference between ALLSTAR and use today?
So,
Is there a hardware difference?
okay, so. Again, to go back and use the office phone extension analogy, okay? Let's say there's a conference call happening on the manufacturing department versus the engineering department, okay? And they are all talking, the manufacturing's all talking. It's very simple to tie that group together. So for example, these two nodes right now are sitting on a common point, which is called a hub. And Rob can connect the hub to the wind system, which is out in the Midwest. It's all over the world, but it's focused mostly on the West Coast. So if you had a friend who's a ham who's on a repeater in San Francisco, he could talk to you here in New York. Real time. It's a matter of patching and disconnecting. That's the beauty of ALLSTAR, is that you can set up and knock down links without any hardware, giant beams on towers, fixed point to point. All that stuff is so far behind us because it's all done on the fly in software. So we'll do a quick demonstration right now. What Rob's going to do is he's going to connect. Are we on one system right now? Sure. Okay. Let's see. Demonstration.
Mobile amateur radio.
Mobile amateur radio blog. Demonstration with W2PW.
Nobody's awake. Wait, what time is it?
It's 3 hours.
Come a little closer to the owl, because they're not hearing us. He just.
7HJ, thank you. W2 Papa Whiskey, anybody else?
Oops.
So we could go over to the eastern half. We can go to one in England. We can go to. There's really no actual location for these things. It's just a matter of where
Well,
they.
you got the hub network, or you got Freestar or whatever.
So there's groups that have common themes. Okay, so I want to be focused on the West Coast. I want to be focused on the East Coast. I want to be focused on England. I want to be focused on Australia. So there's ways to look up and steer yourself into, different areas. Where they get it.
Price, that node that you just connected to,
2560.
560, what exactly is that? Is that a repeater or a super repeater?
That's a common point where 100 different repeaters are all connected to at the same time. And so, just like on the East Coast reflector, there's another 100 out on the West Coast, and you don't want to join them together. that would be a very bad thing.
Is that what he just was implying?
I don't know, because it doesn't make sense what he said, but I'm
The
not
East
gonna,
Coast actually uses 3 different places, but
I'm not
that's what
gonna, engage, what, yes, go ahead.
Is there any geographical restrictions?
No,
So I have a friend of mine, who unfortunately his trip to Antarctica was canceled in April,
okay,
but it's going in November.
okay,
So we're investigating SDR and the characteristics of the internet and ham radios available in Antarctica. Now, there's a couple of things that just happened in the last couple of months. They're actually getting full-time internet in the 3 or 4 megabit range. So if he takes one of these things to Antarctica, he has either Wi-Fi or the ability to get and plug into the network. His node should be able to transmit through the myriad routers, be able to be recognized and be powered on and recognized here. Is that
now,
correct?
how many hops of latency we're gonna be talking about? At some point, it's gonna get a little garbled,
But theoretically possible.
not impossible.
Back in the day, and I'm thinking here of late 90s, early 2000s, when I was working for Northrop Grumman, we had a few folks down in that area. We could not get to the internet, and it fell upon my group to figure out how are we going to get them steady internet service. And it turns out that the only thing they could actually use that wasn't cost prohibitive at the time was meteor scatter communications. Great thing, you could. It was sort of, when it's there, it's serendipity.
Yep.
It usually isn't, and it will not work for streaming media. It does not work for IP.
The big
now that
problem with
there's
this
a
is gonna
whole-
be jitter. So jitter and packet loss. Now jitter is basically where packets kind of do this, they get ahead of themselves, they go behind themselves. And TCP is excellent at recovering from that sort of thing, but we don't use TCP. We use UDP, which is basically just a vomit of information, and it's gotta be fairly clean. So,
given the proliferation of LEO satellites that are going in for internet, is that gonna solve the Antarctic problem?
No, because they don't orbit over the poles.
Well, the thing is, Starlink just made that happen in the last couple of months. Elon Musk basically has the satellites pointing to where you can get a base station with like hole and small, very small aperture receiver, and basically do Starlink anywhere in the world.
That's quite new. I'm not sure how good the poles. But you need more than one device because it will be.
the difference between TCP, which is used for like file, and UDP, which is used for like streaming, is that TCP can, here I am, got it, back and forth, and UDP is just like a stream.
TCP by design does sequencing.
Yeah,
UDP by design
Does not.
does not.
right. Want to hear a UDP joke?
Sure.
Sure.
That's the joke.
I had somebody get me on that so bad, I'm like, for a minute, I'm like, yeah, sure, go ahead, tell me. What's the joke? And the guy goes,
Enough to add RTP.
what?
Easy enough to add RTP.
Okay.
Real time protocol.
Yep,
The thing that it adds is sequencing.
yeah. Okay, so we're all over the map here, and we're definitely not talking about basic stuff anymore. Let's bring it back to basic. Does anybody have any basic questions?
So I don't want to be annoying.
I'm just gonna ask you to really be robust, because I can probably hear you here.
So this ALLSTAR network only consists of repeater.
No, repeaters, base stations, mobile phones, headphones,
Yeah, no, I understand.
yeah,
Does it exclude the web?
excludes the web?
Yeah.
I don't know what.
No,
you
it
mean.
uses the web.
Let's make a distinction between the web and the internet.
Yeah.
They're actually somewhat separate entities.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Press, I think I know what he does.
Go ahead, please.
Is echo, right? You can have a web interface to echo. That's also have.
Okay, yes, so there's a program called IAX-RPT, because the basic audio management system for All-Star is called IAX, which stands for Inter-Asterisk Exchange. And there's a PC program called IAX-RPT, where you can literally jump on a node, talking via your microphone and listening on your speaker. That is not a node in itself, though. It is actually a client that attaches into your node. So you don't have a node number when you have an IAX RPT session, but you can make a remote connection to your own stuff or another node that somebody welcomes you to use. Conversely, there is a program called, Rob, what's it called? Repeater phone? Repeater phone, yeah. A new app out there called Repeater Phone. And it is a little bit more like a node versus a client of your own node. You can make connections to other nodes without jumping through your own home node.
The Supermon though is really kind of the GUI here.
Superman is just a control page to see status, set up and knock down links, manage your node. Has nothing to do with audio though.
No,
So my understanding is that Echolink does have some protocols to ensure that its users are licensed amateur radio operators. What is ALLSTAR doing to ensure that the users are actually hams?
Similar. Echolink has a vetting process called validation. You have to send them a copy of your FCC license. The problem that I face with Echolink when I'm setting up in an ALLSTAR node is a very much a chicken and the egg situation. Glenn and I went through this the other day. Okay, you can't get on Echolink without being registered, but you can't register without being on. You can't be on without being registered. So it's tough to get through that. Forgot what the next thing I was going to talk about. Oh yeah.
And ALLSTAR has a similar vetting
When you
process?
want a node number, you apply to the ALLSTAR system, and then a couple of hours later, you've got your node number. You give your, amateur information, blah, blah, blah. Speaking of amateur, ALLSTAR is not limited to the amateur radio world. ALLSTAR is open source. You can use ALLSTAR in commercial or in GMRS. There's a Davis Park Fire Department that I can listen to on the scanner, and I swear I hear an ALLSTAR courtesy tone. I know they're linking it by ALLSTAR, and it's perfectly legal. There's GMRS.
But it would be illegal
To cross the
to go from an amateur node
Yep.
to a commercial.
Right.
yeah, so like okay, so you have BTG
Right.
is using ALLSTAR now for linking their machines.
Right.
But if I knew what node, I could not, even though I'm licensed for GMRS, I could not connect it to ham because
Right.
that's crossing the streams.
Right.
And now I've created a problem.
Right. And a legal problem, not a technical problem. Yes.
It's a completely different type of question. I know that folks are using ALLSTAR nodes as repeater controllers.
The fantastic.
Right, yeah. What I've been looking for is how do you do the interfaces, for example, on receive? I may want to have a single string indicator come up to be remotely readable. If I was transmitting on the repeater, I'd like to know what the SW warrants of the antenna is. I'd like to know what the DC power grid is. Things that I would call SNMP type of parameters.
Definitely a thing.
How does it? I can't find that anywhere.
Okay, so what you're gonna have to do is you need to have an A to D interface, like an Arduino would do it. Okay, now the Raspberry Pi has about 40 pins on it. So what you can do is you can dedicate 5 pins, for example, that'd be 5 bits of resolution. And you can have an A to D converter that would take your relevant signal strength, it would average it, and then it would put on the pins, at the end of the transmission, it might put a low, high, and then those 5 bits would be converted into a selected courtesy tone. So the harder I'm in the repeater, the higher the courtesy tone can be. The I could remotely, anything can be done, and it's not that. Not like you're inventing the new thing, you just gotta think it through and work it out.
Currently,
In other words, the system doesn't have this built in, you have to write it on, add it on.
But that's the beautiful thing, you can do whatever you want.
If you don't code, it's really tough.
If I
Well, then you just get out your checkbook and hire someone who does.
currently on our repeater system, if you come in on a particular machine and they're linked together, we actually know which machine you came in on.
Right.
So whether it's the east or the west or the Echo Link or whatever, it gives a little Morse code in the background there of
The
which.
approach that BTG is exploring, no, it wasn't BTG, it was, Lou, MI2H.
Yeah,
Okay, so he's got a third node system. And all that does is notice which repeater's coming in the last incoming transmission. When my node is connected and I can configure the file properly, it will give me a unique courtesy tone depending on what node I'm connected to. Okay, so let's just use east, west, and mid. All right, so the east repeater comes in, my node's going to generate a beep, and the west repeater comes in, boop, and back and forth. So the neutral third party node will keep track of what the last transmission was, and it will play a file over the network. It could be an audio file, it could be Glen Oaks, it could be Plainview, it could be East, it could be.
now can that be just heard on the repeater and not on the network? So let's say we were hooked up to something like East Coast Reflector, we would not be giving all those little courtesy beeps.
No, you just touched on the problem.
I thought Lou said he figured out how to do that.
You can't have it both ways. You're gonna have to stand that feature down if you ever connect your network up to an outside network. As long as you're your own little world, fine. Because those audio files are being propagated equally throughout the entire network. The moment you put your little network on a big network, the big networks, they hear the same stuff your little networks hearing, and you'll be asked not to do that in very strong votes.
Because I know the repeater, the individual repeaters can have their own identities, and that's not heard.
That's not a problem, because the interface knows which direction it's coming and which direction it's going. So for example, the interface knows that it's going to produce audio on my repeater, not down the network. It knows which end of the world it is. But the solution that Lou's trying to implement definitely does propagate that unique courtesy tone down the network so that other repeaters can hear it. That's the good news, and that's the bad news. Because if you jump Weimark onto East Coast Reflector for a reason, that's got to go.
You can have whether it's upstream or down on radio or like the ALLSTAR. You check the ALLSTAR.
Yep. So by using the GPIO pins on the PI, and by writing scripts that will sense the high-low status, it can direct scripts to happen and not happen, and it's not trivial, but it's not insane.
Getting a node on PC.
Yep.
I see the Linux build for that. Is there like a Windows 10? So you're on a PC platform, you're on Linux.
But what I heard you say was to put my node on a Windows. That's not the same thing as can I use a Windows PC to talk on the ALLSTAR system? They're going to be using a client called IAXRPT.
Okay.
But that does not mean you'd be able to set up a node on the Windows
If
system.
you want to set up a node
But if,
on a
They're going to be in
PC,
Linux.
has to be one.
but if the source is open source and you're a clever programmer, you could recompile it, modify the things that are Linux specific to use the Windows equivalent and run it on a Windows PC.
Can you get back to me when you're done?
No, I'm not gonna do it, but it could be done.
Use Windows system, Linux, just run Linux.
Virtual machines. Yes, you can run a virtual machine on your Windows machine. And there's virtual Pis, there's virtual, Debian instances, that will work, but that's not really what we're talking about. You're talking about, can I just use it on a Windows PC? Now, unless you're gonna be using IXRP, which is an audio client back and forth, it's not a node.
So if we were traveling remotely
Yeah,
and I put this IAX-RPT program on my laptop or my Surface tablet.
yes,
I could connect into the Weimar repeater system,
yes. However,
just like I do with Echolink. but-
yes, but the administrator has got to set you up with your own login, and there's no practical limit as far as I know to the logins.
So this is how you're saying it's more controlled than Echolink. Echolink, if you look up W2BL anywhere in the world, you can connect to it if you're an Echolink.
All day long,
But
But
here,
you could shut it down.
unless there's a whitelist or a blacklist. Yes,
so you're saying is that Blue would have to give everyone that wanted to do that
an individual login,
their individual login.
and the ports have to be open so it can accept an incoming call. Yes, that would work.
So we could do 310 of them?
I haven't heard of any upper limit. Are you familiar with the idea of how many different users can be logged into an asterisk system, or?
Once upon a time, it was 16 bits, so 65,536.
Are you guys?
No,
Okay, so we're getting a little long in the tooth. I can do this until Tuesday. So, you know, at some point, do we have questions? Any questions?
One question that always comes up is the idea that a station is supposed to ID every 10 minutes. And let's say you were talking on All-Star 10 minutes, where would that ID be? That ID be?
IDB?
There you go.
And,
And that's
and
the
who
question
would
that
have
a lot
to
of
ID?
Remember what the intent of the FCC is. They do not care if I know your call sign. I can talk to you for 3 hours and never say your call sign. Just my call sign. Okay, and my call sign has to be spoken only at the point where I'm making RF. It's important to think this through. So when I speak my call sign, it goes out over the network. Every speaker on a radio out there hears my call sign. But that's all you have to do. You're only identifying your link into the system. I once had a guy argue with me. He was convinced that if I hooked up my radio, hit a disconnect command, and of course, his transmitter in Georgia goes up because I hit my disconnect. He was furious with me because I wasn't identifying. I don't have to identify. All I have to do is identify my transmitter. And by the way, fun fact, I don't have to do it until 10 minutes has passed. Y'all know that, right? It is not legally required to say your call sign until 10 minutes into the transmission. I can have a complete conversation.
or when the transmission ends, if that's sooner.
The conversation, not the transmission. So I can come on the radio and say, hey, Rob, hey, press, hey, we can talk for 9 minutes and never say our call signs. And then I can say this W2PW. You don't have to identify. Weird, look it up, it's weird. So all that identification stuff is really only about your little radio going to the first point where it goes in the network.
Going out to the RF, you could also have like subliminal or code identifier, no.
You can do whatever you want, but it's not the only point.
I don't think it should be subaudable, it has to be heard.
What, I think he was saying that you want to have some things going on down your signal that nobody can hear, doesn't matter. This transmitter has to identify every 10 minutes.
If there's traffic.
Right, now, some countries require you to beacon your ID, we don't do that, but there's a setting in the ALLSTAR system to make a beacon ID every 10 minutes.
82 FIU.
Go ahead, George.
Yes. Does this have FCC approval for use on amateur radio bands in US?
For a long time. The first VoIP systems were back in like 2000 or earlier.
Would this be considered interconnect? And that's legal? You would need a specific mission code type system?
We can link repeaters, right, on RF?
It's not.
No, I can't hear that. That's very low. Does ALLSTAR, as the way it's being described, have FCC approval for use on amateur radio bands?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, there is, yes, George.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
If you can look up something that would refute that, I'd be very curious. Wouldn't you?
They even can use this apparently on GMRS, where you're not allowed to use a phone line, but you can use this.
Right.
The start of an introduction.
But you're saying that it is open. You're saying it's open. How are identities established? I'm not sure of that.
Think of it this way.
How are identities of open links coming in? I'm not sure of that because if they're not really identifying themselves, how does FCC approval apply?
Point one, think of this as ALLSTAR Link is basically a radio with a really long microphone cord.
No, I understand the intent of, I understand the internet link.
So
I understand the establishment of the approval of internet link, but open source, has it been approved?
I think you're getting.
Has it been approved?
Yes, the answer is yes. You're confusing open source network with open source software code. They're two different things, and the FCC doesn't have to approve open source software.
All the FCC cares about is your RF emitter. At the other end, is it identifying properly?
Yes. And it doesn't.
Okay. Okay, need to establish that for users that are out there who are even newly licensed and concerned.
So as a control operator, if I have a repeater, I am the only one who's responsible to identify my hardware, not the guy at the other end, not the guy in the middle, my transmitter in my neighborhood. That's the only identification that has to happen. Has nothing to do with the audio, where it came from, how it was created, reproduced, nothing to do with that.
And the reason that two people talking across a repeater have to ID is because they're each IDing their transmitter, not the repeater transmitter.
Right.
That's why the repeater comes out every so often with a little Morse code or some crazy fun stuff that they can actually have on voice.
Just a quick comment, the FCC does not need to approve the microphone you tap for the radio.
And they don't really care.
Saying before, that Rich started the conversation this evening with using ALLSTAR to manage our network for LimeWire. How do you see that implemented and what benefits are we going to derive?
So I don't know what your goals are, because I wasn't in that levels of meetings, but it sounds to me like you want to have your repeaters able to and probably constantly linked, but not necessarily. The beauty of the ALLSTAR system is that you can have 7 repeaters and one can go offline and then join back in. You could have them all dragged into another net and then drop it. So it's all so fluid how it can be started and stopped.
We could connect any 2 repeaters together on one conversation and another 2 repeaters on another conversation, join a 3rd one in. Oh, disaster has happened. We could switch things around and change things around to have a UHF or a VHF, or we can have one network for everything.
Simplex.
Automatically, do that?
It's not automatic, but it is automated. It's not automatic, but it can be automated. Rob.
So I was under the assumption that one of the goals with the ALLSTAR system, the ability to do full duplex. I was under the understanding that if someone was talking to Glen Oaks, someone came in on Selden, at the same time, you wouldn't get a person at Selden, but you get a person at Glen Oaks.
No, you can hear them both, and you hear that on the repeater now.
Right, now, I don't believe that was before with the RF. I think that was the point.
Oh, yeah, no, the RF was one way at a time.
Right, that's what I was under the.
And
Our system cures that problem.
Also,
people stepping on each other will come out.
you can misconfigure your system as a simplex node, and it's not. This is something that I overlooked one time when I set up the Great South Bay. The default is simplex, okay? If you connected up a repeater And it was set up as a simplex node. When there's an incoming when there's an incoming signal, it goes, so I talk, goes through the network. I let go, it stops. The network responds. Okay. But what was happening was that dreaded "this is" thing. That the whole network things where you go, this is W2PW, that's gotta go. Because what happens is all those starts and stops, there's all these things that get turned around back and forth. So people were going, this is, letting go, and then they were transmitting, and meanwhile, the system generated a tail and blocking it. So half the time, they couldn't hear each other. Converting it to duplex solved a lot of those problems. But by duplex, it's very weird. So for example, if you're listening on a busy net, like East Coast Reflector or whatever, sometimes people will double, and you can hear 2 or 3 people perfectly clearly, because the system is not simplex, it is duplex. But please, for the love of God, anybody ever running a net, do not do that "this is" thing, because it's counterproductive. It causes more harm than it does, and it doesn't solve anything. Because any 2 people can go, this is W2PW at the same time, and you're just causing stepping into it.
Well,
Were there any?
the theory behind that.
I know what the theory is, and it's
Was
all
that
wrong.
the 2 people are not gonna be saying this is at the same speed, and when one of them releases, they'll hear the other one. But with the duplex system, you don't need that.
Okay, I'm gonna hold my hand and I'm gonna go 3, 2, 1. And when I get to 1, I want everyone in this room to say "this is" together.
This is.
W2PW. You can't hear everybody who's using the same number of milliseconds to say the words "this is." Can't be done. However, if I say W2PW, he says KD2U, QK, and somebody else says WB2QDS. Those differences are going to spread out the time. But if everybody's going "this is" at the same time, that's all you're doing.
So it might get a little confusing when you're trying to hear all the different calls, but if you're really good net, you can actually say, oh, I recognize Glenn in there, I recognize
This guy-
Press in there.
This guy K2SHF is an animal. He can hear 3 or 4 or 5 people at once. So that's an absolute, 30, 40-meter cluster. And you can pick them all out and say, okay, I got this and that, and we're all going, oh, hear that.
Now, on our EMR network, we've been running into problems, and we've actually trying to find a way around it. If I'm on the Plainview machine and he's on the Glen Oaks machine, and we have somebody else on their own machine in Brooklyn and all this other stuff, if we're all trying to jump in at the same time to be heard, the machine's only gonna get lost.
Okay, any questions? Go
Just,
ahead.
All right, so understand the thing with the node. That's interface between the RF and interfaces to the outside world. I gotta understand the audio being processed, that's the codecs itself. How can, from my handheld, am I controlling the node to say, do this?
Several ways. DTMF commands. Okay, Supermon. So you could have your node, which has a Supermon page, which you can click and you can hit favorites, like radio buttons. You could set up and knock down links. You can see the status. You can see is your node transmitting, who's transmitting now in the network, or if you just have an HD, 6 or 8 different digits, you can set up and knock down links. Cool.
Talk to you separate.
No, it might,
That's the part I'm.
it might be helpful if your question was.
If you're connected through Echolink though, to my machine, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay, on the Supermon, it's only gonna show my call, my machine is connected. So if we're not sure, you know which source it's coming in, but it could be coming in from Echolink.
But I think.
That's one of the reasons why.
Yeah, I've got to know now.
Yeah.
Well,
Got the node, I'm in the backyard, I got my handheld, I wanna make a connection.
yeah, you can do it by DTMF or you can do it by click. Or you can do it with an app called Node Remote that will literally by a button, it will manage your node. It'll start and stop links.
But
Yes.
you need a repeater that takes ALLSTAR.
Right.
It's not, it's not.
It's not magic. You can't connect to a repeater that doesn't have ALLSTAR, but if it does, you're in good shape. John.
Okay, so first off, let me say.
Yes.
Secondly,
I saw one guy said, oh, no.
assuming that you didn't want to make a hotspot
Okay,
or control a repeat. It seems to me that that ALLSTAR and Echo can do much of the same thing.
no, Echolink is a one trick pony.
Yeah.
It talks, it listens, but ALLSTAR can do HF remote bases. It can do bridges to other modes. It can do phone patch. It could do, there's so many
Before I
things.
answer the question. So I'm looking at my Echo link, I mean, I can see the W2PW.
Right.
And presumably I could connect to it and use the Waterman repeater through my phone.
Right,
If I made a mobile ALLSTAR node, say for my car.
right.
And I wanted to connect, Lou would have to give me a log, yes?
No, you can connect to the W2VL ALLSTAR system as long as they're accepting incoming calls.
You need the login if you want to use that IPX.
IX.
Yeah, that's when you need the login.
Okay.
No, but if you're a node, okay, my node is down in Massapequa. I could theoretically just connect into, as long as I made sure I cleared everything first, R76, clear everything else, and I could go into the system, okay? Basically, we only have one number that we're listing. All the other numbers you're gonna find out are like 19 something, whatever. Okay, now my 1999 is actually my Echo links.
Not routable.
It's not routable.
There's a numbering system above 20,000, above 2,000 and below 2,000. Anything below 2,000 is for private purposes. It's not accessible from the outside.
So I can disconnect my Echo link and you can't even get into the system with my Echo links. Or I can even win.
Good, stand by. Yes?
One of the issues, even with public safety, is over reliance on the internet. If there's a disaster, one of the reasons that we're literally out of the club.
Right.
Is there a way to whether have an RF or a wireline backup in case the ALLSTAR node fails?
Yeah, let me give you a real case example. Okay, the VTG system, a pair now going forward of repeaters. Now, the guy used to link them with literally a pair of radios in his garage, hooked up back to back. When the east repeater would transmit, receive, go on the OS repeater, back and forth. Works pretty good, but that's a small world. So we got a node on the east repeater, a node on the west repeater, and an intermediary node at the guy's house called a hub. Okay, the hub makes connections to the two repeaters and they see each other through the hub. So far, so good? Okay. Now they desire to jump on the Midwest net. The hub makes a connection to the Midwest net. Remember, everything on the ALLSTAR system is a level playing field. Everybody hears each other equally. So the moment that hub jumps on the Midwest system, guess what? The two local repeaters are on the Midwest system. Now what happens if there's a power failure? The hub goes away. Now you've got two repeaters that are basically like Jack and Diane, two kids with nothing better to do. They're staring at each other. So then you can do a thing that will query the health of the connection every minute. And if the hub's not present, the two nodes will assume the hub's not there. So let me go ahead and connect to each other. So you can have setup and knockdown automated.
Still for the internet, not backup radio and wireline. One of the things they started after 9/11, the AC 1000 and the other audio gateways they use to package the HWHF system together.
Right.
My thing is with, like I said, with everything going on, if the internet comes down, can it fall over automatically to those two of them?
Yeah.
Or could it fail over to wireline? That's a good idea.
Yeah, you can set fail patterns to go, like I said, that scenario where the guy had the two radios in his garage.
If you pull back to those two radios.
Yep.
Can you,
Hang on, now, let's supposing those two radios in the garage are no longer connected by wires together, but they're going through their own node. A little pod. So it's a mini repeater. So the receive, hang on, so the receive comes in, the repeater goes, okay, out it goes. So you've got a hardware patch.
Right.
That can be turned on and off by scripting. So
So if you normally go on day to day, it would be, it's running on the internet.
All together.
All of a sudden, there's a failure of the internet, the script would tell it, okay, I don't hear this, let's go back.
RF backup.
Gotcha.
Also, this will work perfectly fine off the internet. So you could have your intranet, your own backbone, your mesh system, I believe it, ICOM in their ALLSTAR system has an internal network that they can set up on 10 gigahertz or whatever. So the ALLSTAR system doesn't need an external network. As long as you've got IP connectivity, it doesn't matter if it's through Verizon or through your own stuff.
If it's through an internet, can you have like a console where you can actually switch on, like, what's it from a computer and be able to dispatch of that?
You can speak over the thing, yeah.
So you pick repeater A, you pick repeater B, knock the repeater up or down, knock the patch up and down.
Yep, that's all.
That's what,
A question.
who's working on that now, because understanding that the internet could go down, but also Suffolk might be down and that's or not, so you also have to know that.
So let me touch on that for a second, because this is
You know, that was basically what I was gonna ask is if the eastern repeater goes down and the western's still working. And you got, you got the house in the middle. Can you go now RF between that center node to the east and then have it go in through the internet to the west?
Okay, let me give it a real world example. Sandy came along. My girlfriend never lost power over internet, but down the street did. Would you agree that between cellular, Verizon, Optimum, DSL, maybe not everything's gonna be down all over the place. You could be down and you're up. So let's say you've got a node at your house and a node at your house, okay? You don't need to have a node at the repeater. You can have the node at somebody's house. It's just a transceiver. So if the internet goes poo-poo, maybe you've got 5 base stations all ready to provide connectivity to that repeater on the hill. Maybe only 3 of them can, maybe only 1 of them can, but you got a shot, right? You don't have to have your node inside your repeater. Your node could be at the house and the repeater could be make it louder. You follow what I'm saying?
Quick comment on this. I've heard a lot of people say this, as long as the internet goes down, we gotta be very careful about the way you say that, because the internet is this kind of amorphous thing, which is extremely resistant to failure.
Because it's so spread out.
Right, and
What-
the only way you can actually cause it to go down is to set this configured BGP routing information. Other than that, it's always subject to some local part of it.
Local parts can go down,
So
but
that's
the whole internet is
like-
not gonna go down.
So let's say you had a building like the medical center in the middle, which can hear quite a distance.
Crazy, yeah.
And you had transmitters, receivers, or whatever, all hooked up that could go through a hub as a backup. Now, they're normally not listening, they're not normally on, but all of a sudden, a particular node goes offline, you could now use the RF link to that one central place.
Now, before anybody runs off and thinks this through, I just want to mention one thing. If you're going to have a remote node, if you're going to have a node in your house serving a repeater on the hill, that'll work. But you have to do one thing. You have to run what's called PL on core, meaning the repeater can only be emitting while the user's talking. No tails, no beeps. It's got to shut off immediately. So you could have a 6-second tail on the repeater, but the hum's got to go away the moment I let go of my mic. If you don't do that, you're going to be propagating an artificially long tail down the network, and you're going to begin to, gunk things up. Does everybody understand what I just said? Because it's pretty important.
As long as Lou understands.
Lou, did you understand?
I want you to, get an idea and miss that one little step. You gotta have the gated PL. PL's gotta come and go with the user's experience. It cannot stay up during the whole tail.
Those remote nodes, do they have to be full duplex now, or the conversations are?
No.
That doesn't introduce any problem, simply.
As long as the repeater is only passing the PL during the user's
That's
transmission.
not related to the PL, it's in general.
No, but it's important because that's what's going on. In other words, the node at home is listening for that hum. And the moment that hum goes away, the node says, all right, let's turn it around. If that hum stays up during the whole tail, that node's not gonna do that turnaround thing until the whole tail drops. Cool?
In that box, you have the repeater, you could actually get a hotspot to it, so you, if the internet is up and running, you connect via a hotspot. It doesn't care whether it's
My phone is providing the internet to this repeater.
You could actually, but if you wanted to dedicate it, you could put a dedicated, hotspot.
So Chris, so someone had asked what is in it for Lima. So again, go back to.
What's in it for me? I think. I have that.
The point is that within the next few weeks, we will have a good connection between Plainview and Middle Island on 440. Sometime after that, a good connection between Glen Oaks and Middle Island on 220. We have Glen Oaks and Selden, also in the ALLSTAR system, all operating independently.
Yep.
But for example, if the Selden repeater went down for any reason, and whatever method you use to notify people, so the 440 in Middle Island, which will then by ALLSTAR be connected to Glen Oaks, and we still have that island-wide communication.
That's the beautiful thing about it, because you could have full-time, you could have 6 repeaters, 2 connected, another 2 connected, another 2 connected. They'll never be perfect. Except when you go click, and all of a sudden, everybody's in the same repeater. So you can set up and knock down links in a heartbeat. Can't do that with our.
And also Lou is working on an RF backup, but I believe the problem is we need an additional port. You can't just switch, you don't have enough ports to switch from the RF to the ALLSTAR.
Because he's going through the repeater controller. So the 7330 has a 3-port controller. Repeaters on port 1. Like for example, I got a repeater with 7330, okay? My repeater's on port 1, my ALLSTAR node's on port 2, my digital crap's on port 3. And the 7330 does all the traffic copy. Okay? Rob's repeater doesn't even have a controller. The entire controller is literally a Raspberry Pi, and yet he has a modem. So his repeater is both analog and digital, and the Pi is doing the traffic copy. This is the script that I wrote. So basically, what happens is the Pi says, oh, I got analog activity. Okay, you're analog now. I'm going to ignore digital. Analog. Analog's done. Okay, now who wants it? Oh, digital. Okay, now I'm going to ignore analog. Digital. Digital done. I go back and move up. So you can do the traffic cop thing in hardware in a 7330 controller. You can do it in hardware, literally in the Pis themselves. Things that you do. Crazy.
Crazy you need to get with the Linux command line configuration file. To get to the point where you can use Supermod.
Have you met me?
No, you can.
You can go and see what he did and then copy.
There is this one guy, not gonna say who it is, it doesn't matter, he's out in the Midwest, and he has been hammering me for 2 years with the same goddamn question every 2 months. And I've got the chat in the Facebook, I'm like, dude, you're gonna have to look at your notes, but I'll go 2 years and then I'm done. So no, I can help. Luke can help, Rob can help. We're all here to, make things better. All I ask is that you try to take notes and retain what we do. Do you have to be a Linux expert? No. I mean, the handling system, you can have,
Does it help?
It helps a lot.
Yes.
But I mean, you see, with these Pi things, you're downloading an image, a complete, ready to run image. You burn on your SD card, you plug it in, you start configuring a few things and you're done. You're not compiling the system, you're not installing Linux, it's literally download, here you are.
Thought occurs to me. Someone asked earlier if you could run it on a Windows box. I presume that it's open source, so you can recompile the code. So if you have an Intel box that's running an Intel-based version of Linux, then you're running it on what ostensibly is a Windows PC, only it's running Linux instead of Windows. And now you're running ALLSTAR on.
Then it's not a Windows PC anymore.
No, but if you want it to be a Windows PC also, you could make it dual bootable. And you can knock it down and bring it up in Windows and do stuff. Knock that down and bring it back up in Linux and turn on ALLSTAR.
But spend $100 to get a Pi. Because it works better than a PC does, and you're not splitting resources.
Okay, so I've been playing around with mine and I actually changed the picture on the thing and do all sorts of other stuff. And I'm doing it on my Windows computer, but I'm going through a program that actually sends it like FTP to the other thing. And, you know, as long as the files are something they can mutually understand.
There's a graphical drag and drop Windows program called WinSCP that will log into your machine. You can see the files in plain text. You can drag and drop, manipulate. So you know you don't have to be all in the command line. You can do a lot of stuff with this machine, but the core of it is going to be.
So I've been able to change like the picture, my background picture. I have New York City. I don't have Australia, or I don't have you know, Arizona or any of the other.
So you can download, see on the Superman. But yeah, on the background, it's just it's an image, and you can change it to Grand Canyon or anything, any wide panoramic. And that's what I do too. If I'm managing like 5 or 10 different nodes, I'll have the Superman page have like a red banner for this one and a green banner for that one. It helps, you know, tell which one I'm focusing. Oh, by the way, the Superman can literally control other nodes. You don't have to have a set. If you have 3 nodes in your life, one Superman page will manage 3 different nodes, as long as the other nodes are expecting the command to come from this.
Is that a limit? Superman, Superman runs on what? Is it
a web page?
It's a web page, okay.
In your ham VoIP ALLSTAR system.
Yeah, so like
Build it.
on Press's setup that he has on his website or whatever, I can see all of Suffolk County, all the different repeaters that come on, and what's going on as far as how they're even linked together. You can even do bubble charts and all sorts of other fun stuff, and they're all operating like one system. Then the timer goes off and it's time to separate and go your own ways.
Well, we covered a lot of crap tonight. Are there any questions? All right, so here's how you get started. So you download an image either from ALLSTAR Link themselves or from ham VoIP. Ham VoIP is ALLSTAR, but it's a little bit more refined. When you go on the ham VoIP site, you download a file, you burn it to a little SD card, you plug it into a Pi, you buy an interface, and you're starting. You don't even need an interface. You can get a USB headphone, a certain brand called MPOW, a USB headphone, you plug it in. That's what you need. No radio whatsoever. Here.
Well, it's echo link. You don't need a radio when it's on.
Yeah, but this is a radioless node. But so, for example, so this has 1 or 2 spare USB ports. I could plug a headphone in here. I could have both radio and headphone, so that I could talk. I could listen to one system where my users driving around the neighborhood can be on another system. You're not limited to just one node in these things. I mean, we've got what's the hub? Raspberry Pi 4, 10 channels, each carrying about 30 connections at one time. The entire East Coast reflector, which is over 300 nodes at some time, is running through 3 Raspberry Pis, and it's only for redundancy. It's crazy how not busy this system is in terms of strength.
Yeah, but try getting on, you have to wait a little while.
I'm saying that the hardware itself, it's not your bottleneck. Any questions? You all ready to get your own notes?
Doing it right now.
Chris, I would just
All
like
right.
to say, it's public and private nodes. With LIMAR, we don't allow outgoing from all of our repeaters. There will be certain repeaters that will have the ability to always go outgoing, but that's to make sure that the W2PW system is always available in use of local use.
Right. So that's again, system administration policies, like for example, on my repeater out in Suffolk County, I don't have any DTMF commands. You can sit there and send DTMFs all day long, and I know it's gonna go. I only control mine by IP. So you don't have to use DTMF, or you could only use DTMF, or you can only use the app. So very, very flexible. It's almost like if you can think it up, we could probably do it. Yes, sir.
Contact information will be on our website.
But for me?
Yeah.
Oh, W2PW, ARL.net.
Now we have a treasurer.
We are recording this and you will be able to retrieve it on our YouTube channel.
Okay, now, slight shameless sales pitch.
Go ahead.
I have been known to make and provide nodes with extra features, with training, with support, that kind of thing. I don't really want to, but if you don't want to build a node more than I don't want to build a node, then we can talk.
Tell about your nice one with the screen on it and everything. That's great.
Okay. All right, so I have this package I call Hamvoid Premium, and it's got a number of features that are not in the standard Hamvoid. Now, again, I stress to you, you can download this for free, and you can enjoy endless hours of learning how to do it yourself, and I highly recommend that. But for those who don't have the time or inclination, I can provide you with a node that is set up. It's going to have a lot of features like having what's called HDMI. So you could plug into this HDMI port and see on your TV computer monitor, you can see the soup mom, which is not something you do on a regular node. If you connected a regular node, you can see a command line kind of board. Okay. It has automatic port configuration for your router, so you can take incoming calls without worrying about setting your ports. It has, so there's some lights on here, like for example, if I press this, it's announcing the IP address. If I pressed and hold it, it would give me a shutdown. This light right here shows Wi-Fi connection. Very handy for, am I connected, am I not connected? Because it helps you figure out why your node isn't working, because if you don't have a blue light, you're not connected. The light will actually wink out with a number of connections. So for example, if you have 3 connections, it'll be blue, wink, blue, wink, blue. So you can see the number of connections that are active. You've got an LED that goes, I've got transmit activity, receive activity, shutdown buttons, a cool landing page on your Supermount. So you don't, when you go to your web page, you've got a menu that you click the various functions and features, which is, you know, over and above what you get on Hamburg. So there's a lot of stuff that I've done. I mean, it was a hobby. It was a pleasure to make it done, and I've got this whole package. And if you want it, we can talk about it. But if, look, listen, like I said, you can get this yourself for free, and I'll even give you some advice. But if you want something literally handed to you, we can talk. I got 2 customers here right now. Would you recommend?
I would definitely recommend. And he definitely answers the phone. Not always happy, but he answers the phone.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, 2 in the morning just. Lovely.
No, but he usually has the answer somewhere in there, or at least can tell you where to go.
And some books are.
Too late.
Following 2 o'clock in the morning, he will tell you.
In a handbasket.
So when you're done, come on up here and take a look. This is actually a full repeater. This is a real MSF 5000 repeater that I built into a briefcase. It's got a Raspberry Pi, that's the entire controller. It's got a duplexer in it. It's got a 40-watt amplifier that I bought right here 2 months ago for 20 bucks. And this is a portable node, and this is the full duplex node. So you can get nodes that are even smaller than this. In fact, the Raspberry Pi 0W. Rob, remember? 02W. Anyway.
How much power does the Raspberry Pi run on, buddy? What?
Not much.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can use a cell phone battery.
I am using a cell phone battery. This is a cell phone battery and a Pi and 2 radios. This is a transmitter, this is a receiver. And this is at 92%?
It's more than an amp.
Should have a 2.5 amp power supply.
We have deployment of the Raspberry Pis project, we call it Project Green Sky.
Oh, I want to hear more about that. I really do.
And I have one in my, I have one of those, and we needed to be supply to make it work. We're not one. But it was also powering the car.
Yep. Okay, I guess, I won't belong to you too much.
No, you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
All right, so now, Gary, are you able to do a random number selection? Or-
These are your.
Yep, so